Okay.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. Now, the first time I heard about you was when you went on Vanessa's podcast. I think it was during lockdown or quarantine just last year uh, with platform Kick-Ass Chats. And then that's when I first found out about you and started following you because I'm a PT myself. And I'm going to first thing I got to say is thank you, man. Your content has helped me dramatically as a PT. So the first thing I got to ask, man, where do you get all your information from?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm pretty honored to be asked to join. Where do I get my information from? Yeah. That's a very good question. Obviously, I've done a lot of education, so a good chunk of it's from there. But I honestly do think just experience working with people, listening to people, discussing the any sort of battles or struggles that any clients are facing and trying to collaboratively come up with approaches to work around them where appropriate. That's where a lot of the knowledge base comes from. But I think also for that to be the case, you have to be open to really reflecting and critically thinking about situations that you encounter as a nutrition professional, and then applying a lot of information that you learn through education, thinking about how that may apply in the real world and whether it's relevant or not. So short answer to a potentially long answer would be that.
Good man, good man. So I want to start this podcast off by you telling me a little bit, me and the viewers, a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you come down this road of getting into nutrition?
Yeah, this could be potentially a very long answer.
Man, I got time.
I'll try and keep it, rather concise because I don't want to bore the listeners. So pretty much when I finished school, I became a fashion model. I was scouted. Wow. And while I was doing that, I was just a skinny kid, which all male fashion models in high fashion are. But there were some who were like, they had good shape sort of thing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get into the gym and focus on that side of things. However, quickly, I realized that I wasn't getting any results. And that frustrated me. So I decided to dig deeper. And eventually I was just so pissed off and angry that I didn't get any results that it kind of led down this rabbit hole of me exploring, this topic further. Next thing you know, the modeling theme I came to terms with the fact that it wasn't going to be a means to an end, which was fine. So in my third year of uni, I saw a job pop up on Facebook for a gym in my area as a receptionist. And I thought, I'll take that. It might be a good opportunity for me to learn and actually, understand why I didn't get results and why I'm having such troubles in the gym and everything. And then, a year and a half later, I'd actually become a PT and I was fully booked out at that particular gym. And I'd done a few little hobby nutrition courses here and there. Now, a big pivotal moment in that time was, listening to other people and just blindly following what they would say, and then getting sucked into every sort of bad, stupid supplement protocol. The whole Poliquin thing was one of them. I cut out gluten, dairy, and that sort of thing for a while. I did all that stupid shit, right? And then I kind of had a bit of an aha moment when I realized every single time that I'd gotten results or I'd gotten results with a client, the common denominator there was we controlled calories, total calories. And then it just blew my mind because everything made sense. There were still things obviously that I wasn't so sure about, but I understood properly, how calories works. I understood that fundamental principle at the surface level. And then from there, I realized just how much shit, sorry for the noise, by the way, there's a car outside.
It's all good, man. I can hear you just fine. All good.
I realized, what is this guy doing? Idiot. I realized that there's just so much shit that just does not matter or is completely irrelevant, even for people who are quite high level. It's literally just fluff that is doing nothing but making your life more complicated and harder than it needs to be. And that sort of triggered a chain reaction of me getting more experience, me going and doing formal education, me building on those things over time. And then eventually, I built up a little bit of an online nutrition client base, which was sort of a little side gig. And then over time, it sort of grew and PT shrunk. And then there was a few pivotal moments in, I guess, my personal training career where I significantly dropped large amounts of work of personal training. And one of them was the unfortunate closing of Lift Performance Center, which happened at the beginning of 2020. Literally at that point, I was only doing like 6 hours of personal training a week.
Wow.
Performance center closed. I had like only a few clients left at the other gym that I went to, which was Keto Performance, where I was there for a bit. Then COVID happened, and that was the end of it. I pretty much said, screw this, I'm moving to Byron Bay. And so I did. And at that point, I was fully online as a nutritionist. And the rest is history, I guess.
Oh, well, I'm going to start by saying I'm jealous, man. Only 6 hours. Damn, because I've only been started working as a PT for like 7 months now. And I wrote down as a goal, because a lot of my clients are in training. So my background is I went to University of Western Australia. I did a good 3.5 years. I got the all good? Okay. All good. All good. I thought we lost you for a sec. And then I did a good 3.5 years, worked a lot in strength conditioning. But the thing is, the reason why nutrition for me was just finding, it was in basic terms, understanding, what the correct foods are, understanding intake, understanding calories. So that's really what I want to move on to right now is like if I were to come, what's one of the things that is most important? Like what's one thing that you believe is most important for PTs to learn when it comes to nutrition? Like, obviously there's not just one overriding thing, but what's some advice that you would give to a PT who's trying to give nutritional advice to other clients?
Okay, so answering that question specifically, PTs giving nutrition advice to clients. So answering that specific question, this is not about what is the most important thing about nutrition or anything. Literally just answering that question, I would ask yourself this question. Do you think the client needs anything more than super basic nutrition recommendations? Are you unsure? If unsure, or if it's a definite yes, then refer out.
Awesome.
Simple answer. Do not try and give nutrition advice to your clients as a PT who has not done formally accredited and insured nutrition education.
Okay.
And I'll give you multiple reasons why that is the case.
Okay.
You are a personal trainer, and the assumption would be that you are really good at being a personal trainer. That is your niche. That's what you do. So why would you go and put on other hats and do a mediocre job of other things when you could rather just refer out? That would mean that the client would be working with someone whose dedicated profession is nutrition. The client would get better results. There'd be less risk of you, sort of hurting the client in some sort of way. You'd probably get more trust from the client because the client's got more trust with you and more respect for you. And because they've gotten better results, you probably get more referrals. Because you're not wearing multiple hats of other people, you're able to just focus on what your actual job is, which is to be a personal trainer and be really good at it. Because you're not dedicating time to being a nutrition professional, which you're not, you're also able to take on more personal training clients, which means financially you are better off. So for that reason, and also the litigious part of it, it seems like a no-brainer that if you have a client that requires anything more than super basic nutrition recommendations, refer out. Now, what are basic nutrition recommendations? Well, pretty much the Australian Dietary Guidelines. If you want to give clients nutrition advice as a personal trainer, you can, as long as it's within the Australian Dietary Guidelines. Unless you want to go and get accredited and insured in nutrition, which not many personal trainers want to do, and may be better for them just to refer out. But you are absolutely allowed to provide guidance to your clients within the scope of the Australian Dietary Guidelines. And it's a fantastic resource. Not many people know about it. It's hugely underrated because it's very, quote unquote, governmenty and boring and basic. It's not fancy, it's not like keto or this, carb cycling crap or periodization this or 12-day low carb boot camp.
That's later on what I wanted to get into, but keep going.
Yeah, it's basic. It ticks the boxes. And the great thing about the guides is that it's highly flexible. It can achieve results with very basic nutrition recommendations. And yeah, I just think the guides is something that personal trainers should probably be more aware of. And it's actually disappointing because even nutrition professionals who are formally qualified, insured, and accredited, some of them don't even think about the recommendations of the guides. They're too worried about the intricacies of protein timing or something fancy sports nutrition stuff when their clients aren't even hitting their 2 servings of fruit and 6 servings of vegetables, 6 servings of whole grains rather. So I think the guides definitely deserves more attention, and it's a fantastic resources for personal train. It's a fantastic resource for personal trainers looking to get better results for their PT clients through basic nutrition.
Awesome. That was really good answer, man. So for this next part of the podcast, I wanted to, start asking you a lot of nutrition questions. Now, some of these are going to sound like, I don't know, complete fads or complete myths and all that. Now, the first thing I want to get into was I was scrolling through your Instagram just this morning, and then you put up a really good post some time ago about collagen. Now, for someone who has absolutely no knowledge about this collagen stuff whatsoever, is this something that you're not going to really recommend, or is it something you're going to recommend? What's your personal take on it?
Well, let's take a zoomed out perspective first, and let's just think about supplements as a whole.
Yeah.
So there's a handful of supplements that are well researched, that we actually have robust evidence behind to say that they do something positive. Now, of those very few supplements in the literature, not always has there been a positive outcome from taking this supplement. Correct. Sometimes it's actually been neutral. And when it has been a positive, the magnitude of positive effect is tiny. Okay, so not a whole lot. So already we've not painted a great picture for supplements. The next thing is that things like eating your plants, controlling your calories, eating sufficient protein, that stuff supersedes the magnitude of positive effects that supplements could potentially have by miles. Okay, so again, supplements aren't looking too great here. Now, if you were asking me about a supplement like collagen, which is still relatively new, it's rapidly gaining popularity. There's just not enough research on it to say that it definitely works. It may work. There's been some positive research that, it's showing promise. But given the fact that we can't say for sure that collagen supplementation definitely does something beneficial, given the fact that if anything, it's going to be a small amount of potential positive, not very much at all. And given the fact that the basics of nutrition make way more difference than any supplement full stop, I would only be recommending a supplement in general if someone was consistently nailing the basics first and foremost. And it'd be very highly unlikely that I would ever recommend a supplement that is newer, more obscure, and doesn't have the legitimate, robust backing behind it. And that is certainly the case for collagen. It has shown some promise for, from memory. It's been a while since I wrote that post and went through the literature on collagen. There is some promise for joint pain when co-ingested with vitamin C. I have read some stuff on, I think it was skin, not much on hair, from memory, not much on nails too. So, I think taking collagen is, if you're worried about that stuff, you're probably missing the forest for the trees, or putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. I think you'd be far better off diverting your attention to other things that are going to improve your overall health, or whatever sort of goal you would be trying to achieve through nutrition.
Awesome. So that sort of so steering you more into this supplement direction. Now, as a PT, I don't really recommend supplements, But ones that I do personally sometimes take myself is the ones that have the most amount of literature which I can find. So really, if I were to point off 3, which I were to take every day, first one's magnesium. There's about a whole bunch of studies behind that and why it's effective. It has a whole bunch of actual, benefits for the body. The second one is zinc, obviously, because again, it helps with male, hormones and testosterone support and all that sort of stuff, which I want to get down the track. And the third one, of course, is creatine, because creatine's been around for quite some time. There's definitely been a lot of studies in the literature, especially as well to do with the creatine loading cycle. And so those are the main 3. But is there anything else that, has some form of benefit or something that is more backed with the literature? Would you recommend? I'm not saying they have to, but in a ideal world, if you were to recommend it, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so anything you're deficient in. So if you've gone to see a doctor and they've done your blood work and they've said, hey, you're actually deficient in this thing, then that would be cause for supplementation. Now, you mentioned magnesium and zinc there. How do you know that you actually need these 2 things? How do you know that you're not already getting enough through your diet? So that's something potentially to think about. If you were already getting enough, then taking supplemental doses of a individual nutrient, a vitamin or a mineral, may have some flow-on negative effects that are not really often that discussed. More often than not, it's going to make no difference and it's fine. But sometimes there may be a negative flow-on effect, such as it could impair bioavailability of something else, leading to a deficiency. So circling back from that, creatine monohydrate, that's the one you want. It's well-researched. You don't need to cycle off it or anything like that. It's fantastic. It's cheap. It ticks the boxes. 3 to 5 grams per day. It'll take several weeks to have a positive effect because it works off saturation. So you saturate the intramuscular stores of creatine, and that's where you get that positive effect. Other supplements include whey protein powder. Now, this is only for someone who struggles to eat enough protein, and or if they just want a convenient food source of protein, or a food source of protein that would go well with something like oats, for example, because no one's going to be adding a chicken breast to their oats, right? But you could add yogurt, so food for thought there. So we've got creatine monohydrate and whey protein. If you're a vegan, you could do rice and pea composite blend, as that's a pretty favorable amino acid comparable to whey protein. Then beyond that, if you're an intermittent high intensity sort of bout type of exerciser, CrossFitter, things like that, beta alanine is something that is probably worth looking into. Caffeine, absolutely. Caffeine is pretty much standard. There's some positive research on things like sodium bicarbonate, and there's a few other supplements there, but really outside of those, fish oil is a big one, because if you're not eating oily fish once or twice a week, taking a fish oil supplement is a really good idea. If you live in a cold climate, or you don't get much sunlight, vitamin D, but that would be, again, something that you would want to get a blood test done through your GP to find out what's going on there. And that's pretty much it in terms of supplements, to be honest. I don't think I would really ever recommend any supplements beyond that. It also depends if you want to count things like gels as supplements, or sports drink powder supplements, which could be something that an endurance athlete might consume during exercise. But yeah,
that's a solid answer. Now, earlier on, you just mentioned protein. That also brings me to my next question. Now, these days on the markets, there's like 100 different brands, and they're all selling some form of proteins, like, oh, this is best, or mine's best. And now you've got things along the lines of, you got whey protein, and you got casein, and then you got plant protein, and then you got, now this is a bit of a broad question, but is there an ideal type of protein? Is there, would you rather have plant, regardless of their actual nutritional standpoint, obviously because a vegan's going to have to go with plant protein, but from someone who's not following any like specific route of nutrition, which ideal like protein is best, would you recommend?
First port of call would be whey protein concentrate.
Okay.
Now, the difference between whey protein concentrate and isolate is really just isolate goes through an extra filtration process. That's about it. It is lower in lactose, so people who are sensitive to lactose would go for whey isolate. But if you're not sensitive to lactose, if you're not vegan, vegetarian, if all that stuff's fine. Whey protein concentrate, because it's got a very favorable amino acid composition. So the amino acids that make up that total protein is very high in branched chain amino acids, namely leucine, which is sort of like the quote unquote big boss protein, I guess you could call it, the most powerful for muscle protein synthesis. So first port of call would be whey protein. If you're lactose sensitive, try isolate. If that's no good, then go a rice and pea composite blend, which would be the same answer if someone was vegan. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, all these other protein powders out there, like weight gainer shakes, they're basically just whey protein with a bunch of powdered carbohydrates, just to get more calories in. That's all they are. Those shakes, those protein powders that are like, lean protein or skinny protein or something like that, that's basically just often whey protein powder or a plant-based protein powder with a ton of added fluff that literally does nothing except for jack up the price and make a good marketing strategy. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So whey protein concentrate, first port of call. Next down the list, whey protein isolate. Next down the list, rice and pea composite blend.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. So moving on to the next question is when we spoke earlier on, you talked about all these different types of diets and all that. Now, the one thing I keep seeing in today is the ketogenic diet. And for me personally, as someone who's training constantly, trying to do like 1-2 sessions a day, I roll my eyes every time someone says, oh, they fast for 6 hours or they only have a window of eating. Is there any like pros and cons to this type of diet?
Yeah. So there's a 3-step process that we could go about answering this question.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, let's say we're worried about weight loss or weight management of some sort. Now, when protein and calories are matched, there's going to be a negligible difference in terms of results. Energy balance is what underpins weight change over time, not the ratio and amounts of carbohydrates and fats present within your diet. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, what's the difference between keto and a higher carb diet for fat loss? When calories are matched, as I said before, nothing. However, carbohydrate containing foods are typically whole grains, fruits, vegetables, those sort of things. So what is the characteristics of those that is conducive to weight management or weight loss? Well, firstly, they're lower calorie per bite. So you get a high quantity of food volume or a high amount of food for a same amount of calories as if you would eating a high fat diet. You also get dietary fiber, which is the undigested portion of plant-containing or plant foods. It yields very little absorbable energy. So again, you're getting more volume going into your stomach, into your intestines. You're feeling a little bit fuller, and you're doing that on the same amount of calories. So that's going to help you control your calorie intake and yield the weight management results you want. The third thing is fruits, vegetables, whole grains. What are they high in? Vitamins and minerals. So if we're eating carbs, we're probably going to be more likely achieving sufficient vitamin and mineral intakes. So there's a few pros for going on the higher carb end or biasing towards carbs. Now, beyond that, if we bring in the sports performance thing, so really any sport or activity that is strenuous and difficult and hard, where you're on the struggle bus sort of thing, that's going to be primarily reliant on glucose to regenerate ATP and fuel that muscular contraction. Okay. If you do not have glucose present, you are going to be impaired in your ability to perform. Okay. Now, for people who sit on their ass all day at work, don't really train very much, this point is really completely irrelevant and preference would take precedence. But for people who have an element of consciousness for how well they train or how well they perform in their sport or activity, then it absolutely makes sense to include carbohydrates in the diet. Furthermore, if someone doesn't give a shit about sports performance or training performance, but they want to optimize their physique, whether it be for fat loss or muscle gain, if you can train better, you're going to be driving a greater stimulus to generate an adaptation, which is muscle growth, or to retain more muscle during a fat loss phase. So even if that's you and you don't give a shit about sports performance and you're just in it for looks, it makes more sense to eat carbohydrates. So what are the pros of a ketogenic diet? Well, in some instances, they may be the preference for someone. And if that can promote better adherence to calorie control, then okay, that's great. If you think about it, if you cut out carbs or fats, or at least limit them, you're basically taking away a lot of hyper palatable, very calorie dense foods from your diet. They're basically no longer on the menu. So think about all the indulgence foods out there. Often you'll find that they have carbs and fats present. Okay. Now, if we say, okay, well, we're not going to eat carbs, and all of a sudden we can't have ice cream, pizza, all these yummy things. If we say, okay, we can't have fats anymore, then we can't have the same list of foods. We're limiting our ability to eat indulgence foods. And that goes a long way in calorie control. The thing is, people do the ketogenic diet, they cut out a bunch of calories because they reduce their, they reduce their fat intake. So they've reduced calories via a reduction in fat intake. That's seen a calorie deficit. They've gotten great results, and they've told all their friends that cutting carbs is the way to go. And the other thing that they've done is they've basically eliminated their ability to consume a lot of hyperpalatable indulgences, which has probably had a greater magnitude of effect on their ability to lose body fat. So we've got a classic case of correlation versus causation. So for general fat loss and general health, it's not really going to make a difference when protein and calories are matched. However, there's certainly there's more pros to having carbs than there are cons.
That makes a lot of sense, because personally for me, if I were to break down my diet, is carbs is like my favorite thing to go for. Like there was a point in my life when, I actually did I gave the vegan thing a try. And the reason being was because how much I actually enjoy eating carbs, and how much I actually enjoy eating rice, how much I actually enjoy eating things like beans. So it wasn't too hard to sort of trade it out. But primarily for me, the one thing that I feel like it benefited me the most was getting rid of things like dairy. Now there's a lot of debate over dairy, and especially in things like lactose. And that sort of brings me down to my next question involving things like milk. Now, we've got a whole bunch of milks. Like, God, when you go to the supermarket, you got almonds, you got oat, you got full cream, you got skim, you got all those types of milks. Now, if you were to present someone with a plan to safe in terms of like fat loss, how much does things like lactose and dairy play a role?
Literally zero.
Zero? Yeah.
Yeah.
And why is
in fact, because total calories is the thing that underpins weight change over time. Okay. Whether you eat gluten or dairy does make zero difference. The only reason by which it would make a difference is that if you said, hey, I'm not going to eat gluten anymore, then you can't have cookies, you can't have cakes, you can't have all those really calorie dense palatable foods anymore, because they're off the menu. So spontaneously, you're probably going to reduce your calorie intake. Now, in terms of dairy itself, on average, overall, given the literature we have, I think it's safe to say that we can say it's probably accurate that dairy's a better idea for your health than not having dairy if you can tolerate lactose just fine. Okay. We've got to think about, it's not just as simple as dairy versus no dairy though. There are lots of different types of dairy, as you mentioned. We've got low fat dairy, and then we've got full fat dairy, things like full cream milk. We've got butter, we've got cream. Now those things, they're calorie dense. They're also quite palatable. So it's easy to consume a lot of calories when you're eating those things. They're also comprised of saturated fats, being dairy fats. And that's the sort of fats that we certainly don't want to consume a whole lot of. We probably want to moderate our intake of for general health, sort of long-term health reasons. Okay, but low-fat dairy doesn't have saturated fat. It's got lots of very high-quality protein, so high biological value protein, high in leucine and those branched-chain amino acids that do spike muscle protein synthesis. I mean, there is some conflicting research to this again, but I think on average, if we look at the research versus dairy protein versus things like soy, then we see a greater increase in muscle protein synthesis after consuming dairy protein most of the time. So there's also a lot of merit to consuming dairy as well. We've also got to remember that dairy does contain a lot of minerals and vitamins. So it's another food source of a lot of those things, which are conducive to our health and function.
Oh, that's actually really beneficial. Because personally for myself, I'm not someone who actually does consume much dairy. Especially, I don't really drink much milk because my favorite thing to go to is almond milk because, well, one, I love the taste. Two, personally, this is from an anecdotal perspective. I feel like when we have, some people believe when they have milk or when they have dairy, is that sometimes it leads to bloating. Is there any science or evidence behind that, or is that me just telling you a personal thing?
Personally, I've not seen anything to that effect looking at milk specifically, but I haven't really specifically looked for it as well. What I will say is that I don't drink milk either. Well, if I was to have milk, I'd probably have almond milk, soy milk, or oat milk, but I eat a lot of yogurt. I don't really care for dairy milk though. I don't drink it. I don't have milk in my coffee or anything like that. Just because but I really like my Chobani yogurt or my YoPro or something like that. And I actually do notice that if I was to have milk, I do generally feel a little bit not so great in the stomach afterwards. I don't know why that is. I can only speculate. But either way, I don't really have a need to consume milk. So it's just something that I don't really think about. And I just, honestly, if we're thinking about milk itself, I actually prefer the taste of oat milk. It's my favorite taste of milk. So I would always choose oat milk over, say, skim milk or full cream.
Good. Yeah, I actually honestly definitely agree with you on that. So now earlier on, you also said the magic word, and that was also, you jumped ahead onto my next question, and that's soy. Now, especially soy milk, I think it wasn't too long ago where we had that trend or that phase that was going around, soy boys like soy. Surely this, and then because the argument that they presented was that when soy contains estrogen or like high levels of estrogen, and then that could be obviously detrimental to performance or hormones. Surely you can put into more simpler terms why that is not the case.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how I would put this quite simply. So think about it like this. If you had like 50 liters of soy milk every single day for years, like decades, maybe you'd have elevated estrogen levels. But if you're having 200 mils of soy milk a day in your coffee because you like it, it's going to do jack shit. Good. The thing is, people talk about food and hormones. Like if you eat this special diet or eat this food or don't eat this food, it's going to, optimize your hormones. And especially in female nutrition, you see these programs all the time. Like, I'm going to fix my hormones, or my hormones are out of whack. It's like, what hormones are you talking about? Have you done blood tests through an endocrinologist to identify these hormone imbalances? So what are you basing this off? Are you basing this off just, what someone's told you? Sorry, there's a plane going over. What are you basing this rationale off, that you have something to fix about your hormones? Okay, now we've got to remember that there are a ton of hormones in the body. And yes, food absolutely does affect them. For example, when we eat carbohydrates, the pancreas releases insulin, which is a hormone, okay? But typically when people talk about hormones in the context of nutrition, at least colloquially, we're talking sex hormones, things like testosterone, things like estrogen, okay? Now, can your diet affect these levels? Well, yeah, technically. So for example, if you were eating very little calories consistently, as a male, you would have suppressed testosterone, and as a female, you would have suppressed estrogen. Okay. If you were eating a diet that was very poor in vitamins and minerals, you would have an unfavorable hormonal profile. If your diet's well-rounded, if you're eating roughly, not too far away from your weight maintenance, either side of it, if you are healthy, if you're active, if you're getting good sleep, if you're managing your stress, your hormones are going to be as good as they're ever going to be naturally. But the idea that eating one particular food is going to wreck your hormones, or eating a certain combination of foods is going to fix your hormones, is complete and utter bullshit. Mm-hmm. And anyone sort of pushing that stuff should seriously just stop, because they don't know what they're talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understood. Now, moving on to the next question. There's a lot of debate amongst, I would say, personal trainers or nutritionists. And the one thing that we also talk about is things like meal timing and all that. Now, personally, for me, I am someone who actually loves to eat before bed. I'm someone from an academic perspective. Because I train literally that I have a Brazilian jiu-jitsu session, and then that will finish around 8:30. I want to try and be in bed by around like 9:30, and in between that point, I always make sure I like to have something to eat before I go to bed. Now, I was having this conversation with someone in the gym the other day, and they feel like they said they told me about a study where eating like literally before bed can have a catastrophic effect. I just wanted to ask the question: is there a certain time limit which you shouldn't eat before bed, or is there or having a meal before bed, does it have any effect that you know of?
Yeah, it absolutely can. But I think people associate this question with whether you should eat or not, when rather it should be a question of, well, how big is the meal? Okay. If you're having a family-sized lasagna and then you're smashing a whole tub of ice cream 20 minutes before bed, you're probably not going to be able to sleep.
And why is that the case? Sorry, why is that the case?
Because you have quite an elevation in blood sugar concentrations. Your body also has to process all that food, and basically you're going to be a hot mess, for lack of a better phrase. And there's also a bunch of neurotransmitter things that may get blocked, for lack of a better phrase as well. And that can affect your ability to fall asleep or achieve continuous restful sleep throughout the night. Now, if you are having a small meal close to bed that contains a little bit of protein and a little bit of carbohydrates, then it probably is going to actually enhance your sleep. Okay, so a little bit of carbohydrates may enhance your sleep, but the effect is probably going to be not a whole lot, and it's something that I probably wouldn't write home about. Look, yeah, if you're having a massive meal close to bedtime, then yeah, your sleep's probably going to suffer. So it really depends on how big your meal is, how close to bedtime. Mm-hmm. The composition of the meal, I think, plays less of a role than what we might sort of think in society. I don't think it really matters. I think people overthink this too much. I think it's a small pebble among big rocks. Mm-hmm. If your schedule aligns with having a meal, if your schedule and preferences aligns with having a meal right before you go to bed, provided that meal is not huge in size and calories and therefore going to impair sleep specifically, I don't see any reason to suggest you shouldn't have that meal before bed.
And how close is too close before bed? Like, is it like, are we talking like 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours? Like, if I were to, go home and then have that, that family-sized lasagna and that tub of ice cream and all that, how long should I really roughly be waiting before trying to get some sleep?
Honestly, I can't put a number on that.
Okay.
Because it would depend on, what is the actual calorie content of this family-sized lasagna? What is the size of this human? What are their weight maintenance calorie requirements, or how many calories are they to consume across the day? Hathor Beyonce or whatever his name is going to be like that family-sized lasagna is going to be like a drop in the ocean for him Whereas for 45 kilo female who sits down all day, who doesn't do any training, that's basically going to be double their daily calorie intake. So it really depends. And then it's going to be different for the individual based on pretty much how well the meal sits with them, how many calories they've consumed up to that point, what was their time of their prior meal before that. Like the list of considerations is endless. And therefore I can't really put a number.
Understood. Now, this is just the last question that I have for you. Let's say, now, obviously, your knowledge about nutrition is so vast. Now, if you were to recommend like some sources or some books for people to follow up on this information on, what would you recommend?
Yeah, for sure. What I will say is that the Dunning-Kruger thing is real. So I don't think of myself who has so much nutrition information or knowledge that's vast. Because there are people out there who are 10 times more knowledgeable and experienced and smarter than me at this. So just always sort of my opinion is that you should always think of yourself as someone who doesn't know a whole lot. Obviously, if you had a PhD, you'd be like, yeah, I know quite a lot. But there's always more to learn. And there's always more that as a society, we don't know when it comes to the human body and nutrition and stuff. So resources that I'll recommend. Well, it depends on the person who wants to know about this. If they just want to know for general hobby or like their own interest, they don't really have any specific goals, there are some great people to follow on Instagram, but also there are some great podcasts out there too. If you wanted to get into books, Eric Helms's Nutrition Pyramid book is fantastic. The RP diet is also pretty good. Renaissance periodization. Their diet book is pretty good too. If you wanted to look at courses, if you were just doing it for your own information, a hobby course, Precision Nutrition Level 1 would be my recommendation. Also, there is a new course coming out with Sports Nutrition Australia, which I'm, running, which will be out this year. It's CEC accredited for personal trainers out there who need to get CEC points annually. And that's going to be basically how to achieve fat loss or how to achieve results with clients within the scope of the Australian Dietary Guidelines, which brings me to another resource, which is one for personal trainers. And that is just the Australian Dietary Guidelines. There is a 50-page summary version, which you can read, and that's fine. And you don't even need to read the whole thing as well, because I think there are certain parts, I think guideline 2 and 3 are the main ones that you should read. The rest is on like pregnant people or infants and children and stuff like that. So you don't even need to read the whole thing. So yeah, the Australian Dietary Guidelines. Then if you were someone who actually wanted to make it part of your job, you have a few options. You can either go to uni for 5 years and become a dietitian. And that's something that I wanted to do. And if I could have my time again, I probably would do that. However, I don't really care about clinical nutrition. I just want to do sports nutrition and help people lose weight and gain muscle size and things like that and feel good and stuff. I would refer out anyway to when it comes to clinical stuff, just because it's not my wheelhouse. I don't have an interest in it. In that instance, I would probably start with the Sports Nutrition Australia certificate in applied sports nutrition. And that will give you some scope of practice to start working with clients. It's a limited scope of practice, but you do have some scope. And that's a fantastic opportunity for you to gain some experience. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, I do think that experience working with people is one of the most valuable things you can have to develop your skill set as a nutrition professional. And then concurrently, while you're doing that, you can then go and do a postgraduate diploma in sports nutrition. And once you've done that, you will gain full open accreditation as a sports nutritionist. And then you can do a master's and things like that, which is what I'm doing now. So that would probably be the pathway if you were someone who was a personal trainer who wanted to move into nutrition. I essentially did that pathway, but I did a whole bunch of other fluff with that, which wasn't a waste of my time, but it certainly wasn't like conducive to moving forwards in a direct sense. So yeah, that's probably it. To be
that was good, man. Awesome. And now, last thing I just wanted to finish up on, where can the followers find you, and and of course, can you tell them a little bit more about the course that you're running?
Yeah, for sure. So the course I'm running through Sports Nutrition Australia is we're currently trying to get, we're going through the application process to get those CEC points. So pretty much it's going to be designed for personal trainers who want to help get their clients better results by providing nutrition guidance that uses the Australian dietary guidelines. It's within the scope of the Australian dietary guidelines. It's within a legal scope of this. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, it's just your audio cut out a little.
And therefore,
are you there? I can hear you.
Try to call me and I'm using hot.
Okay. Don't worry. Sorry. So finish up on what you're going to say.
It's designed for PTs who are looking to get results with their clients within their legal scope of practice. That basically teaches you how to apply the Australian dietary guidelines to basic nutrition recommendations that actually achieve the results that your clients would desire. Obviously, it doesn't provide you with strategies to achieve results with clients who require nutrition guidance that's, I guess, more higher level, in which case you would refer out. But for basic sort of weight maintenance, weight management rather, and health goals, it teaches you, how to convert the messages of the guides into actionable guidance. So that's coming out this year. That's through Sport. And then in terms of where you can find me, so I have a podcast. It's called the Macabolic Podcast, MACABOLIC. It's on iTunes and it's on Spotify. You can also find me on Instagram at Mackenzie Baker _ And I work with a company called Fortitude Nutrition Coaching.
Okay.
You can also follow them on Instagram at Fortitude Nutrition Coaching. And we have some other coaches. There's a team of us. So there's more of, we have a team of us there. So certainly give Fortitude Nutrition Coaching a follow. And that's pretty much it, to be honest.
All good. Awesome. Sorry, you got cut out a little bit there. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Sorry, I can't hear you that well. Well, we'll finish it up there, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Really appreciate it. I mean, I learned a lot from just this 45-minute podcast. So first things first, I want to say all the best, man, especially for you and your course, and of course the company that you work for Nutrition, man. And if I end up coming up to Byron Bay one day, man, I will more than be honored to do a podcast with you in person. Okay, man?
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And all the best.
You too, man. Take care. Bye.